Yo, Rad Ramps, Chad speaking, a voice crackled, sounding like it was fueled entirely by energy drinks and punk rock. Hi, I said. I saw your flyer. I'm looking to get a BMX ramp built. Righteous, Chad exclaimed. BMX, love it. What kind of setup you thinking? Quarter pipe? Spine transfer? Launch ramp to glory? I stammered, glancing at the pathetic pile of wood on my lawn. Just a basic launch ramp, maybe 4 feet high, for my 10-year-old son, in my front yard? There was a pause. Front yard? Gnarly, like street style. Bold move, dude. Brad, this guy wants a front yard sender. I heard muffled enthusiasm in the background. Yeah, man, we can totally hook that up. We can swing by this afternoon, scope the scene. It started, as these things often do, on a perfectly pleasant Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, the smell of freshly cut grass, not mine, obviously, hung in the air. My 10-year-old son, Leo, was doing what 10-year-olds do best, riding his bike up and down our blessedly quiet suburban street with his buddy Noah. They weren't breaking land speed records. They weren't weaving maniacally. They were just riding, laughing, enjoying the simple freedom of 2 wheels and a patch of asphalt. Enter Susan. She emerged from her meticulously landscaped front yard like a heat-seeking missile locked onto unsupervised fun. Susan lives 2 doors down, and her lawn looks like it was individually tweezed by horticultural elves. Her prize-winning petunias, flanking her walkway like floral sentinels, are apparently objects of near religious veneration. "David!" she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I was attempting to fix a leaky sprinkler head, mostly just succeeding in getting myself wet. I sighed and straightened up. "Hey, Susan," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Your boy!" She pointed a trembling finger towards Leo, who was currently performing the complex maneuver of turning his bike around at the end of the cul-de-sac, miles away from her precious flowers. "He's going entirely too fast. It's a menace. He almost hit my prize-winning petunias." I squinted. Leo was approximately 50 feet away and moving at the blistering pace of maybe 5 miles per hour. Her petunias were safely ensconced in their raised brick planter, another 20 feet from the curb. The only way Leo could hit them was if he suddenly developed rocket propulsion and lost all sense of direction. "Susan," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "He's just riding his bike. It's a quiet street, dead end. Kids play here all the time. He's being careful." "Careful?" she scoffed, clutching her gardening trowel like a weapon. "This is not a playground, David. It's a residential area. There are standards. What if someone was backing out of their driveway? What if I was backing out of my driveway?" Susan's car hadn't moved from her garage in 3 days. "He needs to slow down, or better yet, ride on the sidewalk." "He does ride on the sidewalk sometimes," I countered, "but it's cracked and uneven down by the corner. The street is smoother." "The sidewalk is the designated area for pedestrian and low-speed wheeled traffic," she declared, as if quoting scripture. "He needs to learn the rules." She gave Leo one more withering glare and retreated back to her petunia fortress. I sighed and went back to my sprinkler, now thoroughly annoyed. Leo wasn't a menace. He was a kid, on a bike. On a street where the biggest danger was usually Mr. Henderson falling asleep while mowing his lawn. But Susan, being Susan, wasn't content with a single skirmish. The passive-aggressive notes started appearing, tucked under my windshield wiper or taped to the front door. A friendly reminder. Please encourage safe cycling speeds in our shared residential space. Followed by, deeply concerned about near misses involving bicycles and decorative floral arrangements. I crumpled them up. Then came the glares from her window whenever Leo rode past. The pointed way she'd hustle her miniature poodle indoors as if fearing a drive-by biking. It was ridiculous. The final straw, however, was the police cruiser pulling up one afternoon. Officer Riley, a man whose weary expression suggested he'd drawn the short straw for suburban nuisance calls far too often, ambled up my driveway. "Mr. Miller?" he asked, adjusting his belt. "That's me, officer," I said, stepping outside. Leo and Noah immediately stopped riding and watched with wide eyes from down the street. "Sir, we received a call," Officer Riley began, sounding profoundly tired already. "A report concerning a child riding a bicycle in an unsafe manner. Reckless endangerment, I believe the caller stated." I felt my blood pressure spike. Reckless endangerment. Officer, he's 10. He's riding a Huffy on a cul-de-sac. Did the caller happen to mention any prize-winning petunias? Officer Riley gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. The caller expressed concern about excessive speed and disregard for pedestrian safety. "There are no pedestrians," I exclaimed, gesturing at the empty sidewalk. "It's 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. Everyone's at work." "Except," I added, glancing towards Susan's house, "apparently those tasked with monitoring bicycle speeds." "Look, sir," Riley said, lowering his voice slightly. "Obviously this isn't exactly high crime, but a call was made, so I have to respond. Just tell your son to be mindful, okay? Try to keep him on the sidewalk when possible, and maybe steer clear of the, flowers down the street." He tipped his hat, got back in his cruiser, and drove away, leaving me fuming on my lawn. I wasn't mad at Officer Riley. He was just doing his job. I was furious with Susan. Harassing me was one thing, but calling the cops on my kid for simply riding his bike? That crossed a line. A big, fat, petunia-lined boundary. My talk with Leo was awkward. "Hey, buddy," I said later that day. "You know Mrs. Henderson from down the street?" I deliberately used the wrong name. "You mean Scary Susan?" Leo asked. Yeah, her. Listen, she's a bit nervous about bikes on the street, so maybe try to stick to the sidewalk more when you're near her house, okay? And watch out for her flowers." Leo looked confused. "But the sidewalk is bumpy there, and I wasn't near her flowers." "I know, buddy, I know," I sighed. "Just try, okay? We don't want Officer Riley visiting again." He shrugged and went back to his video game, but I could tell he felt singled out, and that just made me angrier. The situation festered. Susan didn't let up. If anything, the police visit emboldened her. I saw her standing on her porch, phone held up, clearly filming Leo as he rode past one afternoon. That evening, I found another note. Documenting continued unsafe activity. Formal complaint to HOA forthcoming. We didn't even have an active HOA, just a defunct one from when the neighborhood was built 20 years ago, but Susan liked to invoke its spectral authority. That night I snapped. "I've had it, Sarah," I declared to my wife, pacing the kitchen while she tried to calmly unload the dishwasher. "This woman is harassing our son. She's filming him. She wants him off the street entirely." Sarah sighed, placing a stack of plates in the cupboard. "Dave, I know she's awful, but what can we do? We've told Leo to be careful." "Careful isn't enough for her," I fumed. "She wants him gone, invisible, locked inside playing video games all day. Well, fine. If she wants him off the street, he'll be off the street." I stopped pacing, staring out the kitchen window at our unremarkable front yard. An idea, born of pure frustration and spite, began to form. A terrible, beautiful, possibly structurally unsound idea. "But she is not," I said slowly, a manic grin spreading across my face. "Going to like how—" "Dave," Sarah said warily, putting down a handful of silverware. "What are you thinking? Please don't TP her house or something." "TP? Sarah, please, I'm thinking bigger. More constructive." I gestured towards the front lawn. If Leo can't ride on the street without getting harassed, he needs his own place to ride. Somewhere challenging, somewhere fun, somewhere right there. Sarah followed my gaze, her eyes widening in horror. Dave, no, absolutely not. You are not putting a skateboard ramp in our front yard. Think of the curb appeal. Think of the grass. What will people say? First, I corrected, puffing out my chest slightly. It's not a skateboard ramp. It's a BMX ramp. Totally different aerodynamic principles involved, probably. Second, who cares what people say, especially Susan? This solves the problem. He's off the street. She can't complain. It's perfect. It's insane, Sarah countered. It'll be an eyesore. It's probably against some city code. Where would we even get one? Get one? I scoffed. Sarah, please, we'll build one. How hard can it be? It's just wood and angles. Fueled by righteous indignation and a complete lack of carpentry skills, I spent the next hour hunched over my laptop, scrolling through dubious websites offering DIY BMX ramp plans. Most involved complex trigonometry and terms like coping and transition radius that meant absolutely nothing to me. I finally found one titled Easy Backyard Fun Ramp, with a diagram that looked like it was drawn by a child. Perfect. I drove to the hardware store, filled the cart with an alarming amount of lumber, screws, and things that looked vaguely structural, ignoring Sarah's increasingly desperate texts. Have you lost your mind? Think about resale value. Please tell me you're buying mulch. This wasn't just about Leo anymore. This was about reclaiming my territory. This was about planting a giant wooden flag of defiance right in Susan's perpetually disapproving face. My career as a master ramp builder lasted approximately 3 hours and resulted in a lopsided collection of 2x4s held together by sheer optimism and an excessive number of bent screws. One side was distinctly higher than the other. The main surface had a worrying dip in the middle, and I'd managed to give myself a spectacular splinter while trying to saw a piece of plywood that refused to remain straight. The pile of lumber on my front lawn looked less like a ramp and more like the aftermath of a beaver attack in a Home Depot. Okay, I admitted, sucking on my thumb where the hammer had glanced off a screw head. Maybe I need help. Sarah, who had been watching my disastrous efforts from the living room window with a mixture of horror and I told you so satisfaction, just sighed. Dave, if you are seriously going through with this madness, please, for the love of God, hire someone who knows what they're doing before you build something that collapses and impales Leo on a rusty nail. Defeated, but not deterred, I went back to the drawing board, or rather, the internet. Finding legitimate contractors willing to build a BMX ramp in a suburban front yard proved difficult. Most either politely declined or quoted astronomical figures, likely adding an insanity tax. Then, tacked to the bulletin board at the local skate shop, I saw it. A brightly colored flyer with jagged lettering. Chad and Brad's Rad Ramps. We build sick jumps, backyard minis, driveway kickers. Got wood? We'll nail it. Cheap and fast. Call us. It screamed professionalism, or possibly tetanus. I called the number. Yo, Rad Ramps, Chad speaking. A voice crackled, sounding like it was fueled entirely by energy drinks and punk rock. Hi, I said. I saw your flyer. I'm looking to get a BMX ramp built. Righteous, Chad exclaimed. BMX, love it. What kind of setup you thinking? Quarter pipe, spine transfer, launch ramp to glory? I stammered, glancing at the pathetic pile of wood on my lawn. Just a basic launch ramp, maybe 4 feet high, for my 10-year-old son, in my front yard. There was a pause. Front yard? Gnarly, like street style. Bold move, dude. Brad, this guy wants a front yard sender. I heard muffled enthusiasm in the background. Yeah, man, we can totally hook that up. We can swing by this afternoon, scope the scene. Chad and Brad arrived a few hours later in a beat-up pickup truck that looked like it was held together by duct tape and skate stickers. They were both young, maybe early 20s, sporting faded band t-shirts, backwards baseball caps, and an almost alarming level of enthusiasm. "Whoa," Chad said, surveying my lawn and the pile of wood. "Sick spot. Totally got potential." "Yeah, dude," Brad agreed, kicking at a 2x4. "Good lumber, too. We can definitely shred this into something epic." I showed them the childish diagram I'd printed. They squinted at it. Yeah, basic kicker," Chad nodded. "Easy peasy. We can knock this out in like a day, maybe 2 if we stop for burritos." "Can you make it safe?" I asked, suddenly picturing my homeowner's insurance agent having a conniption. "Safe?" Brad scoffed. "Dude, it's a ramp. It's about sending it, not safety nets." "Nah, just kidding. Mostly. We'll make it solid, promise." Their version of solid involved a lot of loud sawing, even louder hammering, and a boombox blasting skate punk at a volume that probably registered on the Richter scale. Sawdust coated everything. They took frequent breaks to practice kickflips on the sidewalk, ironically right in front of Susan's house. It was pure, unadulterated construction chaos, right there on my previously unremarkable front lawn. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. A few brave souls wandered over, curious. The neighborhood kids gathered at a safe distance, watching with wide-eyed fascination. And then there was Susan. She materialized on the edge of my property like a disapproving apparition, hands on her hips, face contorted in outrage. "What is going on here?" she demanded over the screech of the circular saw. Chad, oblivious, flashed her a peace sign. "Just building pure awesome, lady." Brad chimed in. "Yeah, this ramp's gonna be legendary." I stepped forward, wiping sawdust off my forehead. "Just providing my son a safe, designated area to practice his biking skills, Susan," I said, injecting as much sweetness into my voice as possible. "Keeping him off the street. You know, like you suggested." Susan sputtered, momentarily speechless. Her eyes darted from the half-built ramp to the noisy builders, to the gathering crowd of kids. This is a construction zone. It's dangerous. It's an eyesore. It violates probably dozens of codes. I'm calling the city. I'm calling the police." She spun around and marched back to her house, phone already pressed to her ear. Chad watched her go. "Whoa, harsh vibes, dude." "Tell me about it," I sighed. The ramp wasn't even finished, and already the authorities were being summoned. This was going exactly according to plan. Sort of. By the end of the next day, against all odds and several near misses with power tools, the ramp was finished. And it was something. Chad and Brad had, in their infinite wisdom, decided to paint it bright neon green. Makes it pop, dude. It was definitely 4 feet high, maybe a little more on one side. The transition looked less like a smooth curve and more like a series of abrupt angles. It dominated the front yard like a giant, verdant wooden whale breaching from the earth. It was hideous. It was beautiful. It was done. Leo's reaction was a mixture of awe and terror. "Whoa, Dad, it's huge. Can I really ride on that?" "That's the idea, buddy," I said, clapping him on the shoulder, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Gear up." We insisted on helmet, elbow pads, knee pads, the works. Sarah stood on the porch, arms crossed, looking pale. Chad and Brad, who had stuck around for the inaugural run, offered encouragement. "Just send it, little man. Commit," Chad yelled. Leo's first attempt was tentative. He pedaled towards the ramp, wobbled, and veered off onto the grass at the last second. His second attempt got him halfway up before he lost momentum and slid back down awkwardly. On the third try, he pedaled hard, hit the base, went up, and promptly tumbled off the side onto the soft grass. He popped right back up, grinning despite the wipeout. Again. Before he could go again, however, the familiar flashing lights arrived. Officer Riley climbed out of his cruiser, looking even more world-weary than usual. He surveyed the scene. The neon green ramp, the padded-up kid, the two skater dudes giving thumbs-ups, me trying to look innocent. He let out a long, slow sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all suburban disputes. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice utterly devoid of inflection. Ramp!" "Officer Riley," I greeted him brightly. "Just finished. Keeps Leo off the street, provides healthy outdoor recreation. Solves the whole problem we discussed, right?" Riley pinched the bridge of his nose. "Right." He walked closer, eyeing the ramp's construction with a dubious expression. "Sir, we received multiple calls. Noise complaints from the construction yesterday, concerns about safety hazards, and a specific inquiry regarding city permits for detached accessory recreational structures." My blood ran cold. "Permits?" "A permit," I echoed weakly. "For some wood?" "Depending on the size and permanence, yes, sir, often a permit is required," Riley explained patiently, though his eyes screamed, "Are you kidding me?" "There are also setback requirements, safety codes. Did you happen to look into any of that before?" He gestured vaguely at the neon monstrosity. I stalled. Chad and Brad suddenly became very interested in scraping mud off their shoes. "I'll need to check with code enforcement," Riley continued. "In the meantime, I strongly advise you cease using the structure until we can verify its compliance and safety." He gave the ramp one last look of profound disbelief. "Just try to keep the peace, Mr. Miller." Of course, ceasing usage was easier said than done. News of the Miller ramp had spread like wildfire among the neighborhood kids. Within an hour of Officer Riley leaving, 3 more kids showed up with bikes, followed by 2 on scooters and 1 optimistic soul on a skateboard. My front yard was rapidly transforming into an unofficial, unpermitted, and potentially unsafe extreme sports park. Susan was, predictably, losing her mind. She stood on her porch, phone glued to her ear, presumably giving dispatch a detailed play-by-play account of every wobble and near miss. The HOA, or Susan pretending to be the HOA, slipped official-looking violation notices under my door citing things like unauthorized landscaping alteration, attractive nuisance, and failure to maintain lawn due to ramp obstruction. My ramp, my beautiful, spite-fueled ramp, was causing an all-out neighborhood war. The situation clearly couldn't continue. Either the ramp went, or Susan exploded, or Officer Riley quit the force and moved to a cabin in the woods. A summit was inevitable. Since our HOA was largely defunct, the battleground became an emergency neighborhood concerns meeting, hastily organized at the community clubhouse, which was really just a slightly too small room attached to the pool nobody used. The turnout was impressive. It seemed everyone had an opinion on the great ramp debate. Susan arrived armed with a binder overflowing with photos, printouts of city ordinances she'd Googled, and what looked like sworn affidavits from her petunias. She sat front and center, flanked by a couple of other perpetually disgruntled residents. On the other side of the room sat a surprising number of supportive families, many with kids who had already sampled the ramp's dubious charms. Sarah sat beside me, looking nervous but resolute. Chad and Brad even showed up, offering moral support and smelling faintly of burritos. Officer Riley stood grimly by the door, presumably to keep the peace or call for backup if things devolved into thrown lawn chairs. Susan led the prosecution, her voice quivering with indignation. She spoke of safety hazards, declining property values, the sanctity of lawn aesthetics, the noise, the wrong element the ramp attracted, meaning kids having fun. She painted a picture of imminent doom, where one rogue BMX jump could unravel the very fabric of Harmony Creek. Then it was my turn. I stood up, took a deep breath, and looked around the room. "Look," I began, trying to channel calm reason instead of pure sarcasm. "This whole thing started because my son was riding his bike, on our street, like kids have done for generations. He wasn't hurting anyone, he wasn't breaking any laws, but he was bothering one person." I didn't look at Susan, but everyone knew who I meant. I was told, repeatedly, to get him off the street. So I did. I found a solution, maybe, I conceded, glancing at Chad and Brad, who gave me enthusiastic thumbs-ups. It wasn't the most conventional solution. Maybe it's not the prettiest structure. Understatement of the year. But it gave my son, and now apparently half the kids in this neighborhood, a place to ride, to play, to challenge themselves, right here where I can see them, off the street. I talked about kids needing outlets, about the importance of unstructured play, about how maybe, just maybe, the sound of kids laughing and bike wheels hitting plywood was a better sound for a neighborhood than stony silence and passive-aggressive notes. This ramp, I concluded, isn't the problem. The problem is trying to bubble wrap our kids and our community until there's no room left for actual life. There was a smattering of applause. Several other parents spoke up, agreeing that kids needed places to play and that Susan's initial complaints were excessive. One neighbor even admitted his son was finally spending less time on video games since the ramp appeared. Susan tried to counter, bringing up permits and insurance liability, but her arguments started to sound shrill and desperate. Even her allies looked uncomfortable. Officer Riley just stared blankly at the ceiling tiles. In the end, no formal vote was taken, but a consensus emerged, brokered by a relieved-looking neighbor who volunteered to mediate. The ramp could stay, provided I jumped through some hoops. I had to apply for the proper retroactive permit from the city, which involved getting Chad and Brad to redraw their plans on something other than a napkin. I had to add some safety features, railings on the top deck, maybe some padding around the base. And I had to agree to ramp hours, basically shutting it down after dinner time to appease the noise-sensitive contingent. It felt like a victory, a slightly bureaucratic, red-tape-wrapped victory, but a victory nonetheless. A few weeks later, the permitted, slightly safer, still neon green ramp was officially open for business. Leo, now much more confident, was actually getting pretty good, catching a little air off the top. A couple of his friends were waiting their turn. The sounds of bike wheels and kids laughing filled the afternoon air. I leaned against the porch railing, sipping a beer, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Across the street, Susan's curtains twitched. I saw her face, pinched and disapproving, peering out. I smiled, raised my beer bottle in a cheerful salute, and gave her my friendliest, most neighborly wave. The ramp might have started out of spite, but watching Leo conquer it, watching the neighborhood kids find joy on that ridiculous wooden structure in my front yard, maybe it had become something more. Or maybe I just really enjoyed annoying Susan. Either way, the ramp was here to stay.